Hey everybody, welcome to the latest edition of the Kolpack and Izzo podcast, brought to you by Gate City Bank from our illustrious new studios here in downtown Fargo. With Jeff Kolpack, I'm Dom Izzo. Do you want to get this out of the way, harass me?
Our studio,
or wait till next week when we're on TV?
Your studio.
It's looking pretty slick, though.
Where is the big head of you in here? That's about the only thing that's missing.
I thought it's attached to my neck. I thought you were going to say my large bulbous head.
This is me,
here.
Dom, everything. Don't worry, Mike and I, McFeely, we don't care.
Yes, I know.
Just come in and
you'll
just
do your thing, right?
Act like you own the place.
Own the place, right? All right, Kolpack, after a week of denials, Bo Pelini is gone. Gonzo, like you said last week, on his way
I said a year ago, Dom.
Yes, that's true. On his way to LSU as the new defensive coordinator. The money is exorbitant, which we've done forever and ever. I thought your column was spot on. I want you to expound on a little bit now where Youngstown goes from here, because Bo wanted, at least the reports were, for Carl to get the job. And I don't think Tressel's going to do that, and I hope he doesn't for the next coach at Youngstown State.
It just doesn't seem that the way to go with these coaching hires in the FCS anymore is to have that FBS, oh, he was a big name at one time. He's coming back. He's still got it. Give him another shot. A.K.A. Bobby Petrino at Missouri State now is about one of the only guys. Yep. Bobby Houck at Montana, but he had been at Montana before. That's a little different. And I wouldn't say UNLV is really that big FBS.
You brought up Mike London as well, going back at William & Mary.
Got fired at Virginia, but he went to Howard first.
That's right.
To kind of get his feet wet again and come back into the mix. Now, can he take William & Mary to where it needs to be? I know nothing about the W&M program. I don't.
They were good for a while.
They had some years.
And they've dropped off since James Madison and Richmond took over the league.
What's their recruiting area, all that? I don't know how the tribe, is it still the tribe?
Yep, that's them. Yep.
Don't know how the tribe works. Getting back to Youngstown, Bo Pelini, let's call it like it is. He was average at best.
Yep.
He had that good year in 2016 when the Penguins were unseeded. They were an at-large berth, made the run through the playoffs, and made the title game. I think they had 5 losses that year, if I'm not mistaken. 4? Maybe 4?
I think 4 is what they had.
It wasn't like they're 13-2 or anything.
Remember, they came to Fargo in early November, and the Bison crushed them, and that's when Bo promised after the game there's big changes coming, and they did. They changed things all right.
And Bo was 28-32 in the Missouri Valley Football Conference, which is not that great for a program like Youngstown.
It's bad,
he was billed to make the resurrection back to the Jim Tressel era.
He never beat the Bison. He
0-5.
beat South Dakota State once.
1-4.
Beat Illinois State
1-4.
And beat Northern Iowa twice. He feasted on the bottom half, the Westerns, Indiana States.
In the non-conference, he was 11-1 against the sub-Northeast.
And how often have we bashed Youngstown for what they've done in the non-conference?
They were 4-0 this year. They got off to a 4-0 start, playing the Northeast Conference, playing the Patriot or whoever.
They beat Samford in the kickoff game, and they were terrible this season. So that's you're right. His record is no better than Eric Wolford. And we thought when Youngstown
the same as Eric Wolford.
When they canned Eric Wolford, like, well, how are they gonna get back to where they were? And I think that conversation has to end, Kolpack. They're never going back to the 90s and what they had there.
That being said, I'm with McFeely on his column today on inform.com that we will miss Bo
there's
Pelini
no doubt.
because he had star power. He was a star. He was a celebrity within the Valley football circles of fans knew exactly when Bo Pelini came out into the Fargo Dome, Gate City Bank Field at the Fargo Dome. They knew when he walked on the turf.
Yeah, I mean, there's no way that you couldn't, that fans would follow him.
He had that
aura.
He had that aura. He had the sweatshirt. He had the Bill Belichick sloppy look.
And he had the temper. He had the intensity. And that goes all the way back, and I tweeted this out, fair or not, from that first game with the Bison where he and Carl lost it, and I still think cost his team a chance to at least tie the game at Youngstown in 2015 on that pass interference call on Nate Moody.
So what do you think happened? Why did Bo Pelini go 28-32 in the Valley? Is his intense ways, does that sell anymore?
I don't know. His players, I think, love him. I think his players still play for him, although this year it seemed like they didn't.
They quit against the Bison.
Yeah, they certainly didn't.
But then came back and beat
Illinois State right at the end of the season. So I think he was plagued with bad quarterback play. He never had that. Think of even the year they made the championship game, he benched Nathan Mays for a stretch of the season. Then he came back and quarterbacked the end of the season. So you always tell me this, and you're dead on. I'm listening to you after all these years. You need quarterback play. He never had that. He never had a guy just to take the reins and go. And Youngstown hasn't had that for a decade, probably. So there's one. Recruiting, it's probably there too. Kolpack, I'm not quite sure. He took a lot of transfers. I know they went down that road, and some were big-time hits and some were misses on that
Is
front
Eastern
too.
Ohio and Western Pennsylvania as good of a recruiting ground as it once was known to be? Is it still there?
It's a good question. I can't say sit here and say I'm
Is
an
it as good
authority
as
on that.
back to Tom Cruise in
all
playing for
all the right
Ampipe?
moves. Yeah.
Playing for Ampipe.
Or is there more competition there? Are they going to go to the MAC? Are they going to go to the American? Are they going to go to Conference USA before they would choose a Youngstown State, which is not nearly what it was?
Are they going to the
20 years
CAA?
ago? Yeah, they're going that route. I'm sure they are. I have no doubt about it. But you look at facility-wise, they have an unbelievable indoor. They're not lacking for support, Kolpack. If you were to look, and Mike and I were talking about this yesterday, in their game program, it's filled with local ads, so there is community support for the football team there. They have all on the outside, they'd have everything you want. And on the inside, it's not so great.
That stadium has curb appeal. I remember the first time walking up to
absolutely.
that and go, wow, this thing's massive.
Yes.
It's just
It's almost too big now.
the West stands, the West concrete, I don't know, call it bleachers or stadium. It just keeps going up and up and up. And you go on top of that in the Eder DiBartolo suites and high end.
Where we used to be for the press box, yeah, that was
You're like
legit.
in one of those biggest. You're in one of the highest points in Eastern Ohio.
No
you can
doubt.
see forever.
Now, where we were this year was a complete refurbished part
On the
of
east
the
side.
stadium that they made for the press box, and it's for film rooms, everything that you would want. They spent a ton of money on that
So
to make it.
You have everything there that
Yeah.
you need to win.
Yes.
Do you have cost of attendance?
They don't have that
They
as
don't
far,
have
as
that.
far as I know. I know they do it in basketball because it's mandated for the Horizon League in basketball, which they're a member of, but they don't have it in
Sans
football.
cost of attendance. You have everything you
Yeah.
need to win in Youngstown
Yep.
State.
I'm really curious. I think they're going to go. I think they're going to go off the board here. A coordinator,
Because
a
I
young
think
guy.
Carl would have got the job already.
Oh yeah, I
You're
think
right.
so.
This is recruiting still.
Yeah, I mean, we're
Signing day is next
yeah,
Wednesday.
We're 5 days away from signing day here, so
For
they've got
second signing day.
They've got to do something between then and now. I'm just curious on how they're going to go forward on this with an FBS game in 2020. I think they play a MAC school. They get Akron. So the MAC had stayed away from Youngstown for a long time, and they got Akron on the schedule.
Very
for
winnable
2020.
game.
Absolutely.
Very, very winnable
They
game.
have a trip to Fargo, and I believe they have UND on the schedule as well in 2020. So it's an interesting dilemma to look at for Youngstown. And we had Petrino and Pelini for all of 5 days in the league together.
Yeah, it seemed like 2 minutes, right?
But to your point, when you tweeted about this, the money that he's getting at LSU, I mean, they just have to spend it at LSU, right? I mean, it's crazy.
$2.3 million a year. The coordinator that left to take the job at Baylor was making $2.5 million.
Yeah, Dave Aranda, who got the Baylor job, right? It's monopoly money at that level.
So when his Nebraska money train ran out last year,
start of last year,
he
yep.
spent, and this was my point of the column too, that he spent 1 year in the low budget world of the FCS, making $200,000 a year.
That's a good point. Yeah.
So not that he didn't spend everything.
But I get what you mean.
But
He's in the low rent district.
But when you live in the FBS world and you live there at Nebraska where you have private jets to use for recruiting, you have all the money in the world you need to do whatever you need to do to get a winning program. And then you put that behind after you get fired and you go to a place like Youngstown where you're on a budget. It's a tough thing for these guys to do.
Yep.
And that's why I don't think you're going to see a lot of FBS people coming back to that FCS world, at least the ones who have lived in the multi-million-dollar world.
We're talking the Power Fives.
Which I don't know how Bobby Petrino's going to handle that. He was in the NFL, for God's sakes.
Yeah, granted for like a cup of coffee, but yes, especially at a Missouri State.
Now
where
he's
budget's
got to
even
live
tighter.
on a budget.
Yeah, I mean, that's got to be even tighter of a budget than what Youngstown State has. I mean, that's really interesting.
I wonder how he's going to go. He's going to go, hey, I need to get to the airport. I need to take our private jet to see a recruit. And they're going to go,
What private jet?
what private jet?
Yeah.
What airport? Here's your car. Here's your car from the local booster.
Get to St.
From
Louis.
the car lot.
You know what? St. Louis is 3 hours that way. Good luck. Yeah, you're exactly
Time for some
right.
windshield drive time on interstate whatever.
On Interstate 80, right? Going on there. Yesterday, I don't know if you saw this, and this is a topic we've talked about on the old radio show way back when. It was announced the FCS kickoff game is set for the last Saturday in August. Austin Peay and Central Arkansas will play in Montgomery, Alabama. That's where it's been for the last couple years. In week 0, that's August 29th, I want to say, before the season actually begins on September 5th. I said it to you a while ago. I think it's time to kill this. Once the FBS got in on week 0, it ruined the appeal
What's the point?
of FCS. You agree with me on
that?
that?
Well, NDSU wants nothing to do with that anymore.
They did it twice. They're all set.
You don't need it's all about the exposure. Well, that thing has been sliced now. Your exposure being the lone tree on that weekend. So I'm sure the Bison, even if they were approached, would say,
no thanks.
No thanks.
Yeah. Central Arkansas
season's long enough.
Central Arkansas's AD, Brad Teague, said exactly what you're saying. We love the exposure, but I think they missed the boat on this. If they want the exposure, Central Arkansas said, play at our field. You know what I mean? That hideous field at least would get people to watch, you would think.
When you're thumbing through.
Right.
And
if people are looking for football and hadn't seen that before, what? That's where they play? They might stop for a little bit. To play in Alabama, where neither one of these teams is even close to, from Tennessee and Arkansas, who's going to watch this game? Even the diehards who love those two programs.
Well, I feel like the game and its stature keeps going down a level,
absolutely.
down a level, down a level.
It reached its height, the Bison-Montana game. There's no doubt. Because you know why? There was no other game going on. And you know what?
Yeah, Brett Musburger.
Yes! And you know what happened? The FBS said, hey, wait a minute. Look at the ratings. And that was a FCS game. Why don't we get in on that? And now,
do they have to have everything?
They do. They do. They like to ruin it for everybody. And this year, they're even going another mile, Kolpack, a few miles. Notre Dame and I'm forgetting now. I think it's Boston College or Navy. They're playing in Ireland that day. So the following game is that Central Arkansas Austin Peay game right after that. It's like they couldn't leave well enough alone. They had to go to Ireland to go and play that football game. So
what's next for the FCS? Who's going to be the 2021 game? Is it going to be North Carolina A&T?
They've been in it.
Morgan State?
Nope, they've already been in it. A&T was in it a couple years ago, so they're out. But Austin Peay was the darlings of this past season. I get your point of whether they're at Sacramento State. Get them in there because they had a nice turnaround season in 2019. I think it's probably time to let that one go. You know what I mean, and move on and shuffle off there. So we'll see. I don't think the ratings are going to be super high for that game at the end of August. I want to talk hoops here in a second, but one quick thing. I posted this morning or late last night on Inform.com on the FCS and / Bison connections to the Super Bowl this weekend. First time in a few years, Kolpack, we don't have a direct Bison alum playing in the game. We've had that for the last couple of years, that there's been a Bison alum that played in the Super Bowl. But you look at a couple of the guys that will be prominent in the game, obviously none bigger than Jimmy Garoppolo, who won the Peyton in 2013 and was, for all intents and purposes, I mean, he was the talk. If not for North Dakota State's unbeaten season that year, Garoppolo was the guy in 2013, his senior year.
That was quite the Peyton trio,
right?
4 or 5 candidates up for the award.
Yeah.
You look at Terrence West, finished third, the running back. Vernon Adams had one of the great all-time
55
seasons.
touchdown passes that
and
year.
Finished second.
Yes, yeah.
And Brock Jensen finished fourth.
Cup was in there too.
I messaged Brock and conversed with him this morning, and he goes, yeah, it was definitely a strong, and this is his words,
yeah.
It was definitely a strong and competitive field. I had a great stat year, but didn't hold a torch to Jimmy. He did throw the ball. Okay, here's a little.
Okay.
He did throw the ball on first, second, and third down, though. Brock did not. That wasn't his word. This is Brock talking. I think that helps the stat line, don't you think, a little bit? Question mark. But I take the wins and rings any day of the week and twice on Saturday over the Peyton Award. Oh, he also added this. I also played until halftime in about 5 to 6 games that season. But I agree with your point. Those two guys
that's fantastic.
Had great careers.
Yes.
Kudos to them.
That's awesome, and that's totally him for those of us that know him.
You forget about that. He played,
no doubt.
In the second half, it was garbage time.
That entire season seemed like garbage time in some games.
And he still had 34 touchdown passes that year.
Garoppolo finished with 53, and, of course, Eastern got beat by Terrence West and his 9 touchdowns in that playoff game. And, of course, Towson went on to the national championship game. I was curious how Garoppolo would be as a pro. And then the Patriots drafted him, and he sat on the bench for a few years. But now taking over in San Francisco, Kolpack, and since he's been the starting quarterback of the 49ers, they've Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch have built around him, and they've got quite a team where, I mean, Garoppolo's getting paid big-time money now in the NFL.
So Vernon Adams threw for 4,600 yards that year, 53 touchdowns. Yes. West ran for 1,800 yards and 31 touchdowns.
Yeah. And Cooper Kupp, by the way, won the Freshman of the Year, and he had a ridiculous season that year. He won the Rice Award that year.
Garoppolo had 5,050 yards passing.
Yes. Yep.
And this year's top passer, Case Cookus from Northern Arizona, had over 1,000 yards less passing than Jimmy G did that year.
You look at the other guys, and there's a couple that stand out to me that you're going to see on Sunday. One is George Kittle, who we saw up close at Iowa. And I remember that Bison game in Iowa City, Kolpack, he was unguardable. That's a guy NDSU did not see ever in the Missouri Valley Football Conference, and there's a reason why he's now tearing it up in the NFL. Kittle was really good that day against the Bison.
You don't realize how physical he was when we watched him. Maybe he's gotten a little bigger. I don't know. He just seems bigger with the Niners than he did with the Hawkeyes that day. But the Bison were a pretty physical team, too.
No doubt. 2 other guys before we move on here. One is Khalen Saunders, who now starts for the Kansas City Chiefs. When we were in Macomb last year, he was just mauling guys. Saunders was just unbelievable. He had 2.5 sacks, and I think that all happened in the first quarter.
Wasn't climbing. We couldn't block that guy.
It was unbelievable. They couldn't stop him. What are you updating me? Oh, well, really? We could share that.
Our boy Hoagie.
Leading again.
Well, he's the first guy to tee off today. So as we record
How is that, by the way? I busted his chops on that. He always gets like the first tee time. Do they hate him or something?
I don't know, but it worked out today. -6, sharing the lead right now.
This is at
-6 in the Waste Management Open.
This is the crazy course in Scottsdale where they throw beer at you at the 16th hole. So, holy cow. Well, there you go.
We'll see how he did on 16. Just give me a second here. Well, he shot a 32 on the front.
That's really good going out.
Had 3 birdies and no bogeys. Birdied the 16th.
There you go.
We got to refine that shot. We'll see that hopefully on DAY tonight.
Yes, absolutely. That's the plan on that. So you were mentioned. So Khalen Saunders, he ended up being drafted in the 3rd round by Kansas City. And now he's starting or playing quite a bit with the Chiefs up front. He was unguardable. The last guy was Kendrick Bourne, who
Eastern Washington.
He gets lost in all the unbelievable wide receivers that Eastern had, namely Kupp. But he was unguardable in that game in Fargo a few years back.
That was a high-scoring, just flying all over game. You talk about 2 teams with talent.
Yes, all over the place.
That Eastern Washington team was just incredible. Cooper Kupp and Bourne on the same team.
Yep, I know it.
With the quarterbacks.
With Gubrud and Stick.
And Gubrud could have played this year, but he went to Washington State, didn't see that one.
No.
I wonder what
how he felt about that decision. Yeah. I know you're not a huge NFL guy. You have a rooting interest or a team you'll pick on Sunday.
I always
Kansas City or San Fran.
I go with the team with the best quarterback. I'm sorry you're a Jimmy G fan,
Mahomes
but I think Mahomes is a little better.
Really good. We're going to talk to Kyle Emanuel on the radio show about him because Mahomes' first start was against the Chargers. So I'm curious what Kyle thought of him. He threw 4 touchdown passes.
This guy side-arming, slinging it all over the place.
So here we are. We're near now the second half of the Summit League basketball schedule. I kind of dovetailed Hot Mike last night off the conversation we had in the pod last week about the Bison women's program after they beat UND, played tight with South Dakota State, and then beat Denver despite having 32 turnovers. And I asked Jory Collins about the question you asked him on signing day about, are they tough enough yet? And he said, we're getting there. We're getting there. And I think Kolpack, for Bison women's basketball fans, and this is what I was trying to illustrate last night, I think they've turned a corner. Not the light. There's maybe some light there at the end of the tunnel. You agree with me on that?
First time we've seen progress in the end of January, beginning of February, I think,
In
on
a
any of these
decade.
teams.
Yeah.
11 years, right?
A decade at least, yeah.
A decade,
Yeah.
over a decade.
Yep.
First time you see a team make, and it's documented improvement. They lose at Denver, come back and beat them, and they make a rally to do it. Lose 2 overtime games earlier in the year, come back, win an overtime game, be the better team. They're showing improvement. They beat UND.
Yes, that's been elusive. They've not been able to do that in Division I.
They haven't been in the same house as UND in the last decade
No.
when it comes to women's basketball.
And how they play toe-to-toe with South Dakota State in Brookings. I know the Jacks
They've done that before a little bit, but not
consistently, though.
But that was a total fluke. They beat them once.
That was
such
a
fluke.
total fluke.
Incredible fluke.
That's a great way to put it. Let's see how they do now on the road. They have 2 teams coming up now, Fort Wayne and Western.
How do you handle success?
Right.
They
These
should
are
beat
beatable
Fort Wayne.
teams. At least Fort Wayne on the today's. We're taping this on Thursday, and then to see what they do. Western Illinois is a better team. I like J.D. Gravina as head coach of the Leathernecks, but you're right. Let's see how they handle it now after getting a nice win at home on Sunday.
I like Jory's style.
Yep.
I just like his style. It's not phony, man. Not that I'm saying the others were phony, but when they throw out tweets like, "Oh, we saw some growth today," no, you didn't.
Yeah.
I didn't see any growth.
Here's the thing, and we talked about this when he was hired. You know what he had? Head coaching experience, and the last 2 didn't. And I think that goes a long way.
That's what I wrote. That's what I wrote. What, the week before he was.
You had that on our blog
because they had the finalists, and I said, "This is the guy you should pick. He has experience. He's been on the bench. He's made those calls. He's been in the final minute.
He's called a timeout.
He's called a timeout.
Right.
That's exactly the way to put it.
And that's he's been in that situation before, and I think that's bearing out so far. They still have a long way to go. They've got to recruit better. They've got to get better players in here, but I think there's at least some steps that.
And
are
he's
now
the
being
first
taken.
one to say it.
Yep.
He's the first one to say it.
No doubt. Now on the men's side, NDSU plays at Western tonight. Then they go to Fort Wayne on Saturday. The Bison grinded out a win over Denver on Saturday. They're at 5-2. Last night, though, Kolpack, I don't know if you saw, South Dakota State went to Tulsa and pounded Oral Roberts. This is after the Jacks beat the Bison in Brookings. Doesn't look like they're going. I think Hendo's got a team at South Dakota State. What do you think?
Much better, not much better, better than we thought they would be. They have
After
some
what
players.
they lost? Absolutely.
They lost the best team, arguably, in Summit history.
Yeah, with Jenkins and Dom.
You have the 9th
gone.
all-time leading scorer in NCAA basketball history. You have Jenkins was a great guard. You had Tellenhuisen, right?
Yep, Tellenhuisen, yep.
Was a good
player.
role player.
Too. And you lose your coach. Otzelberger leaves, too.
Yeah.
So they have picked up. They are a full game ahead of NDSU and Omaha with USD a game and a half back. You mentioned this last week. I don't think there's any change in that it's going to be coin flip when you get to Sioux Falls. But these are 2 winnable games for the Bison on the road this week with Fort Wayne and Western Illinois.
You got to pick up some wins somewhere along the road here. They dropped one at Oral Roberts. They dropped one at South Dakota State. At some point, if you're in a contend for a regular season title, and this is the point, you need to win.
You got to win these games coming up here over the next few days. Before we wrap, we will join you after the late signing period next week. NDSU has 2 known verbals here on the late commitment. They got a kicker from Rosemount, Nathan Whiting, and then they got a wide receiver out of the Atlanta area in DJ Hart. He's going to start at wide receiver, from what I've been told, may move to corner. But they went back to Georgia, Kolpack. That worked out pretty well last year.
Why wouldn't you? There's a connection there a little bit. And it's an area where you can find the diamond in the rough, so to speak, maybe the overlooked player like Kobe Johnson was overlooked.
Man.
And found him, and he obviously turned out to be a really good true freshman player for them. 4 kickers next year in camp at present point, at present rate.
What do you think of that?
It's a lot.
It is. They needed every single one against Nichols, and I would venture to ask guess when we asked Matt Enstad, can't have enough is probably the answer we're going to get, right?
Right. Well,
we can't have enough, right?
May the best man win. That's right.
I would just think after Crosa was suspended, Reynolds was hurt, they were down to Will Cardinal against Nichols, that you think that they would probably, you know what, let's get another one in here in case something bizarre like that happens again.
Well, it's not like they're throwing full ride scholarships
Correct.
at these guys.
No.
I don't know if anybody does that on a kicker, not an FCS.
God, they did it with Adam Keller. Bowl did that a long time ago with Keller because they needed a kicker, and they got obviously a great one in Keller. But I don't think they did that after that. I don't think Cam Peterson was when they recruited him. I saw this today, and I know you probably want to have a little comment on this about Jack Maughan going into the Division II Wrestling Hall of Fame.
Well, it's from his years at Northern Colorado. He went
good.
out to Northern Colorado and took a program that was absolutely terrible.
They weren't good.
They were winless the year before, just had nothing going for it. And he took that program over the course of the next several years and turned it into a national title. Not so much they maybe came close a couple years, but at least they were in the conversation when it comes to a national known wrestling program.
Yes.
Got an endowment going out there, so it's fully funded as far as survival in an era when wrestling programs were being cut. Now, those stories sometimes go untold.
No doubt.
And he served on the Wrestling Coaches Association board for 10 years, president 1 year, so well-deserving. And the other two guys, Paul Carlson and Brian Capusta, was just incredible. Lightweight. 3 national titles, he was a D1 guy in a D2 program.
Bison go to Northern Colorado this weekend. On Saturday, they're in Greeley and then to Utah Valley. They beat Oklahoma.
Look good.
I was going to say, you were kind of curious on where this team was in 2020.
Don't confuse Oklahoma with Oklahoma State,
Yes.
Penn State, or Minnesota. Don't confuse the Sooners. They're not at that level of those really top elite Division I wrestling programs. And NDSU should, at least they're beating these named teams like that. You're not getting freaked out. Oh, it's the Oklahoma Sooners.
Well, like Stanford's coming in to wrestle here later this year. I don't know how good Stanford is at wrestling. They're not to the
They're okay.
to the level of what
No.
you're talking about, like an Iowa State, who they're going to see later on at the end of the year. But we'll see what happens with Roger Kish's team. All right, that'll put a bow on this edition of the Kolpack and Izzo podcast. Thanks, everybody, for listening. We'll see you next time.